think what we're seeing now is the fear that societal chaos now produces potential outcomes that could literally destroy this planet. So I would advise people to be the change you wish to see in the world, rather than sit back and be afraid of the direction in which we're going. That's why it's important to hear that message when God says, "You got me all wrong. I don't punish people. I don't command people. I don't require or need people to behave in a certain way." Or the kingdom of God, if you please, is divided into three parts: the spiritual realm, the physical realm, and the realm of pure being.
Obviously. I mean, you were talking to God, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I was talking to God for God's sakes. Now, there's an interesting statement.
I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Neale Donald Walsch. How you doing, Neale?
I'm doing great, and thank you for asking. I hope you are too. How can I serve you?
Oh, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. You know how much I adore you and I adore your work, and I wanted to have you back on the show because I think that since the last time we spoke, which it's been a while, a lot of things have been happening in the world. A lot of things have changed, and a lot of things haven't changed as well. But I wanted to get your perspective on things. But before we kind of dive into that, one question I wanted to ask you, and I don't think I asked you in our last conversation, is when you were writing Conversations with God. I have since our conversation, I've spoken to, I don't know, probably 100 channels at this point in the game. And when you were describing what you were doing as far as hearing God's voice, is that a form of channeling? Did you hear the voices audibly in your mind? Was it in your own tone or own voice in your mind? How did you actually hear the information come in?
Well, my friend, I have resisted, and staunchly resisted describing myself as a channel. Because
Sure.
most people, the phrase is used by most people to define a moment where someone's body is taken over by some other entity.
Correct.
And that other entity is talking through that person,
Mm-hmm.
and they call that channeling.
Mm-hmm.
I did not channel God.
Got it.
So, it would not be an accurate description. I would never use the word channel.
Okay.
Any more than Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John said that they channeled Jesus. They
Fair
simply
enough.
took dictation.
So then how
So
did you hear it then? How did it come through?
a voiceless voice, and I described it actually in the books as
Okay.
a voiceless voice, like the sound of your own thoughts. When I'm thinking, when I have a thought, heck, I got to really hurry up. I'm going to miss my appointment. That
Mm-hmm.
thought doesn't come to me with the sound of a male voice or a female voice or an older man's voice. I don't hear my own thoughts like an old man saying, Neil, you better hurry up because you're going to be late for your appointment. No.
Right.
So the sound of my thoughts does not have any particular verbal characteristic or vocal characteristic. So I describe the experience in my books, actually. I describe it as a voiceless voice, much like the sound of one's own thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I experienced it. I asked a question and bingo, an answer came to me in a voiceless voice, but it was clear enough that I could take dictation
Mm-hmm.
and write down what I was hearing. And so I did exactly that. I wrote down what I was hearing in my mind.
Beautifully said. Now, how has your understanding of God changed since that first book? Or has it changed since that first book?
It hasn't changed since the first book, but it changed dramatically from from the way I experienced God before the first book. But
Mm.
since the first book, which changed my experience of God dramatically, nothing has really changed. And of course, after the first book, there were 8 other books.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 3,000 pages of dialogue in all. And honestly, those pages simply advanced the dialogue and advanced my understanding of who and what God is, who and what we are, and why we're here on the planet. But in my understanding, and I could be wrong. I'll make this very clear in every interview I do. I could be wrong about all of that. It's simply my own understanding. Just as the Pope declares his understanding of the Catholic dogma to be
Hmm.
his understanding.
Hmm.
Uh, Unfortunately, most people think that the Pope is, always correct, that he can't be wrong about anything he says when it comes to dogma, when
Hmm.
he's speaking, as they call it, from the chair.
Hmm.
Um, but in my case, I could be wrong about all of it. It's just simply my understanding of what I was told.
It's fascinating because you brought the Pope up. He recently spoke about hell being kind of it's more of an idea than an actual physical place, and a lot of the hardcore dogma, followers were just like, "Oh, that's sacrilege. You can't say that." But it was the Pope saying it. So like now you're caught between these two places. It's like, well, your spiritual leader is saying something that's kind of going against the initial dogma, and now how people are trying to deal with that and and process that.
It's a question of whose interpretation are
Right.
we individually going to embrace? Do we embrace the interpretation of people who were speaking on this subject, several hundred, if not a couple of thousand years ago?
Hmm.
Or do we embrace the interpretation of people who are receiving and reviewing the information with today's awareness, at today's level of universal consciousness? One of the things I think we have to do and have the bravery to do in theology is something that we have not hesitated to do in science or medicine or technology. But in theology, one of the most important areas, if not the most important area of human interaction, we have staunchly refused to do it. And what have we refused to do in theology? Question the prior assumption. Now, if scientists didn't question the prior assumption, we would never have made any advance in scientific discoveries. If medical researchers did not question the prior assumption on which they based their diagnoses, we would never have any advancements in medicine. And the same is true of technology. What I'm holding in my hand right now would never have been possible. I mean, all of the information in the universe practically is available to me in this little device that I'm holding in my hand.
Hmm.
But if somebody hadn't questioned the prior assumption about 30 years ago or 25 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. But you know what? In the area of theology, we're not allowed to question the prior assumption. What we were told 600 years ago, 800 years ago, 2,000 years ago is not to be questioned. What Conversations with God did for me in my own personal experience was question the prior assumption. And it asked an incredible question of me. It said, Neale, do you think it's possible that there's something we don't fully understand here about God,
Hmm.
about life, and about each other, the understanding of which would change everything? And of course, my thought was, well, I guess it's possible. We don't understand all of it.
Hmm.
So God said, oh, good. So then you're open to perhaps a new understanding. So take these ideas down. And that began a 3,000-page dialogue in which
So
I asked every question, Alex, every question that I could think
yeah.
of, since I had, since I had this open line, so to speak, in my experience. I asked every question I could think of. Questions about relationships, sexuality, parenting, health, diet, psychology, questions about right livelihood. I asked every question I could imagine that I would like the answer to. And God gave me the answer to every single question.
Why do you think that we have such problems as a species, especially in theology, not to question what came before us? Because you're right. If the cavemen didn't question, you know, the cavemen before them, they would have never gotten out of the cave. And so on and so on and so on. Humanity has always been about evolution, about growing and building upon what they had learned from the past. But when it comes to theology, at least in the last 2,000 years, let's say 2,500 years or so, it's been pretty rock solid as far as the major religions are concerned. And even the newer religions that have popped up, you can't question them.
Especially,
Yeah, you
especially
can't.
the,
Yeah, especially
yeah.
those, right?
Well, the reason why, to answer your question, in my understanding,
Hmm.
is that religions tell us that to question the prior assumption is apostasy.
Mm-hmm.
It's heresy.
Mm-hmm.
It's blasphemy. And so to commit heresy or apostasy is committing yourself to hell. And since most people are not willing to move in that direction, especially not to do so publicly,
Mm-hmm.
uh, then we just leave it alone. We just, you know what? Let's just leave it alone. Let it be what it is. And if we hold different viewpoints internally, individually, most of us, not all of us, but most of us, keep it quiet. We just, in fact, I was told as a child that it was impolite to discuss religion in public.
Mm-hmm.
If people come to your house, don't bring up religion.
Mm-hmm.
Politics and religion were supposed to be avoided in all polite conversations. The two most important aspects of life on earth, political beliefs and religious beliefs. We're not supposed to talk about it. Keep it to yourself. Son, don't bring it up at the dinner table when you have guests in the house. So, okay. So, we have a cultural bias against exploring topics that we have been told we may not explore.
Do you believe that the reason for this is that when a person is programmed with their belief system, or they've constructed their belief system of the universe, of life, of everything, it is their foundation, it is their core. And if anyone else comes in with something that shakes or rattles that, they defend it vigorously, sometimes to the death, as there are wars right now about religion going on in the world as we speak. Is that why, there's this kind of constant battling between ideologies and ideas? Because if my idea is right, yours can't be right. But it should be like, if my idea is right, well, what can I learn from your idea? And maybe we can mix our ideas together to see if we can come up with something better. That would be the ideal Pollyannic way of looking at things. But do you believe that that's the reason why people are so defensive when it comes to religious or spiritual beliefs?
Well, I think that's the surface reason why. The core reason why is that we have no idea who we are and why we're here. If we understood that we were spiritual entities, that
Mm-hmm.
this body is just a tool,
Mm-hmm.
that this mind of mine is just a piece of equipment, but that who I really am is a spiritual being having a physical experience. If I had a deep understanding of why, if I'm a spiritual being, I came to the realm of the physical, what am I doing here? What's the point of all this? If I was clear about that, then it would never occur to me not to question, not to continue to explore, not to move further in the evolution of my spirit. So, because I would see by simple observation that the purpose of all of life, including the universe itself, is evolution, to evolve to the next greater, next grander, and grander and grander expression of its true identity. But once I understand that my purpose is to evolve, then I will ask questions. It's like a person going to college, going to the university, but refusing to ask questions of any professor in any class because they're afraid that they're not allowed to ask questions about what the guy is teaching. And but how do you learn anything if you don't ask? How much is two and two?
Mm-hmm.
The guy in the front of the room when I was in first grade said, "You're not supposed to ask that question. Don't ask how much two and two is. But listen to me when I tell you, two and two is seven. And just take my word for it, because I'm the boss." And
Right.
so we're not supposed to question, even if we think by, our own experience. Wait a minute, I put two peanuts on the table, then I added two more peanuts on the table. I didn't get seven, I got four. I don't understand. How can that be? But your own experience is not supposed to be part of it. We're supposed to listen to those who are in authority because they're the boss of all things. It's kind of like my wife.
You, you and me both, my friend. You and me both.
Just kidding. Just having a little fun. I'm just
Of
joking. My
course, of
my wife
course.
is my wife is really very, very willing to announce that I am the one who has all the answers.
I, and you say that with a straight face, sir. It was very good. Now, Neil, with the world right now seems to be a little bit more chaotic than usual, I guess. And I know that's hard to say because there's been a lot of chaotic times throughout history, but I think the feeling around the world is that there is more chaotic things going on. The older systems are starting to crumble around us, like religion and politics and
Well,
finance.
I think there's more danger associated. I'm not sure there's more chaotic things going on. You couldn't
Okay,
get much more chaotic than what was going on, 2,000 years ago in
fair
terms of
enough.
societal chaos.
Sure.
But I think what we're seeing now is the fear that societal chaos now produces potential outcomes that could literally destroy this planet.
Mm,
And if not destroy the entire planet, surely destroy life as we know it. No question about that.
mhm.
So I think it's the level of threat that's created by the chaos that's producing the experience you're describing.
So, what do you say to people who are going through difficult times right now and this perceived danger that is being brought by all this, the perceived danger that you just said in regards to the chaos? What do you say to people who are going through a very difficult time and who are fearful, who are truly fearful about the future of any number of things that are going on in the world, from politics to food to the environment to humanity in general? What advice would you give them?
I would say to them, you can either live in fear and have fear dictate all of your personal choices and decisions and your responses to the world outside of you, or you can choose to create or be part of the process of collectively creating the reality that you wish to experience. Or to put it much more eloquently and much more succinctly, as Mr. Gandhi did, be the change you wish to see. So I would advise people to be the change you wish to see in the world, rather than sit back and be afraid of the direction in which we're going. And that's the choice that I made. I made the simple, I'm not, painting myself as a big hero because I'm one of many, many, many people who have made that choice. But I'm one of many who've decided, you know what? I'm not going to sit here in fear. I'm going to sit here in a place of being and doing what I think I could do and be to add to the possibility of shifting the course and the direction in which our society is moving.
And it is what the great sages and yogis and masters of the past have said is that the only way that there is true change in the world is by changing yourself, because it is a ripple effect. It's a domino effect, if you will, around the world, because you affect every time, every person you touch or come in contact with, you affect in one way, shape, or form, either negatively or positively. Is that a fair statement?
No, you're totally wrong on everything you've just said. I can't imagine how you could have the nerve to speak such words in front of a live audience worldwide. But
Appreciate that.
if somebody wants to believe this stuff that you're spouting, okay, let them believe it.
So, what would you say then?
I would say exactly what you said because I do believe everything you said was accurate and true. But I'm a crazy person, so but
Obviously, I mean, you were talking to God, for God's sakes.
yeah, I was talking to God for God's sakes. Now there's an interesting statement.
Isn't that amazing? That's a great statement. So, Neil, where do you see us going as far as humanity in the next 5 years, 10 years? Because there seems to be a shift happening, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. There seems to be a global shift in consciousness happening because, I mean, you've been in this space long enough to know how things were 30 years ago versus how they are now, as far as openness to these kind of public conversations. I remember when Conversations with God came out, it was heresy. It was you were considered a controversial author back then because it was just such a, how can you talk to God? You must go to a church to talk to God. Where nowadays it's a lot more acceptable to have a direct relationship with the source or God or whatever you want to call him or her. But back then it was a little different. So do you believe that there is this global shift in consciousness happening?
Well, there's no question. Everywhere I go these days, I see bumper stickers on the back of every car. Shift happens.
That's great. That's a great bumper sticker. So it
Or
is.
maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't shift happens. Maybe I misread the bumper sticker. But in any event, I think that I think that shift is occurring,
Mhm.
and I think that there is a expansion of human consciousness, all kidding aside. And I think that we're reaching critical mass. We haven't arrived there yet, but I think we're reaching critical mass in the number of people on the planet who are opening their minds to some new ideas, some new thoughts, some new choices, some new decisions about who we are and how we want to experience ourselves. I think in the next, you asked about the next 10 or 15 years, maybe not the next 10 or 15 years, but I do think in it, honestly, in the next 25 or 30 years, before my children are my age and before my grandchildren are their parents' age now, I'm saying in the next 25 or 30 years, I think we're going to see the first domino will fall. And I think then we're going to see um, that critical mass playing its effect on all the peoples of the world. We're all going to decide, you know what? There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to handle our ecology, our climate, our finances on the planet, the economic, experience of most people, to say nothing of our political differences. There's got to be a better way to simply live life. And one by one, until the number reaches critical mass, I think we're going to be announcing what that better way is. Can't we find a way to disagree agreeably?
Hmm.
Do we really have to kill thousands of people every week because we have a border dispute? We disagree on where the border exists between our two countries. And because we disagree on where that border line should be, we're going to kill 25,000 people a day?
Hmm.
I mean, what kind of primitive species would even think of such a thing? So, but I do think that more and more of us are now saying this is primitive, barbaric behavior. And there's there's a huge desire now welling up in the human heart to change the way we are experiencing ourselves and change what we're doing with and to ourselves, to our climate, to our ecology, to our political process. I mean, there's got to be a better way.
Is that why we're going through these kind of rocky times? I mean, it's been a hell of a ride since 2020. Uh, every year of this decade has been challenging to say the least. If it's not a pandemic, it's economic. If it's not economic, it's political, and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of stuff happening in the world. Why do you believe that we are going through this very rocky time? Is it kind of humanity's soul blueprint in a sense? Like we all have to go through struggles in life to teach us lessons. Are we doing it as a collective as well?
I don't know if it's about teaching us lessons, but it is about giving us an opportunity. It's
Mm.
about raising the consciousness of the collective with regard to where we're heading. And so, and we're demonstrating where we are heading by our behaviors. So I do think that we experience crises, one crisis after another, as you've mentioned, political, economic, etc., uh, as a means of waking ourselves up.
What message do you believe that God has for humanity right now during this pivotal time in our existence?
Not one single message,
Hmm.
but I think the messages that I receive in summary are number one, God's most important message to the world. You've got me all wrong. Now, why is that message important? Because human beings have been encouraged by religions, and there are 4,000 religions now on the face of the earth being practiced. I didn't make that number up. You can Google that.
Hmm.
There are 4,243 religions currently being practiced on the earth today, not since time began, but in this moment.
Hmm.
And most of those religions teach of a deity, a supreme being, who loves us for sure, but who also judges, condemns, and punishes those who do not do what is demanded or commanded, if you please, of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's dangerous about that, why God says, hey, you've got me all wrong. What's dangerous about that is if we imitate that behavior, which of course we do, we've been instructed by our religions to act divinely, to act, in a godly manner. So we think it's godly. We think it's a godly manner to judge, condemn, and punish those who do not do what we command. So if it's okay with God, it's okay with us. So
Sure.
if God sends us to hell when we don't do what God commands, then we can create hell for those who don't do what we command, because we're simply behaving the way God behaves with us. That's why it's important to hear that message when God says, you got me all wrong. I don't punish people. I don't command people. I don't require or need people to behave in a certain way. I might have mentioned to you in a previous program, Alex, but let me help your audience to know exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. When I was 9 years old, 9 years old, I was told in catechism class in my elementary school, because I went to a Catholic elementary school, and the priest came in once a week on Wednesdays usually and taught catechism. He was a lovely man. He was a very kind, gentle man. He wasn't a mean-spirited person. But in one of his lessons, I raised my hand. You're describing, the difference between a mortal sin and venial sin, a major offense and a minor offense. Can you give me an example of what is a mortal sin? A mortal sin is a sin that's unforgiven by God. If you die with that sin in your soul, you go straight to hell for the rest of eternity. So he said, certainly, my son. And he explained to me that it was a mortal sin, punishable by everlasting suffering and death if you miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse. Fair enough if you're caring for a sick parent, or if you have to work to make a living for your family, fair enough. But if you have an old friend that you haven't seen in 12 years, suddenly shows up at your door visiting on a surprise visit and says, hey, let's go play a round of golf. And you say, I haven't seen you in 12 years. Wow, right, get your clubs out, let's go. And it happens to be 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and you miss Mass that particular Sunday, the first Mass you've missed in 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get hit by a car on Monday and die before you got a chance to go to confession and confess your sin and be given absolution by a priest, God sends you to hell for eternity for missing Mass. And this is the deity we are told to believe in. But by the way, I checked with Catholic authorities just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to make sure I wasn't exaggerating. Because I thought, did I really mishear what I was told when I was 9? But no, the spokesperson for the bishop's office in my diocese confirmed for me, yes, it's a mortal sin for missing Mass on Sunday or any holy day of obligation. So, and by the way, the Catholic Church is not the only church that teaches that we go to hell for offenses. If you're a Muslim and you happen to be a female, you must wear a hijab. And if you don't wear a hijab or a hijab, however they pronounce it, if you don't wear that covers your face and hopefully your entire body, and only have a slit in front of your eyes so at least you can see where you're walking. But if you don't wear that particular garment, you are said to be offending Allah.
Mm-hmm.
And repeated offending of Allah sends you to Hades, to hell again. So, religions tell us what we should eat, what we should wear, where we should go, what we should do. And if we don't do these things and follow these commandments, and by the way, the instruction to wear certain clothing for females in the Muslim faith is not a suggestion. It's listed in the faith as a command.
Wow.
It's a commandment.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the God we believe in. We believe in a God who punishes you severely if you wear the wrong clothing or miss the wrong ceremony, don't do what you're supposed to be doing. You know what else I was told when I was a child?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not supposed to eat meat on Fridays.
Yeah, of course.
Eating meat on Fridays was considered a sin. And if you're a member of the Jewish faith, you're not supposed to eat pork.
Right.
Not on Friday, not on Tuesday, not on Wednesday, not on any day of the week. because it's a violation to eat pork. I mean, really, honestly, folks, I'm not trying to be ridiculing. I'm just asking an honest question, folks. Honestly, this is the God we believe in because we received what we thought were clear instructions 2 or 3 or 4,000 years ago, when our minds were less sophisticated and our awareness was less complete than it is today. But whoa, we're not supposed to question the prior assumption. We were told this thousands of years ago, and we're not supposed to question what we were told.
When I went to Catholic school as well, I I was questioning. Even at a young age, I was like, well, all these rules, if you don't do this, you do that. But what about all the Buddhists in the world? What about all the people who don't follow any religion? Are they just sorry, bad luck? It just didn't make any sense.
That's what we're told. That's what we're told.
Right.
We are told exactly that. Sorry, bad luck. You're going to hell.
So if you were born a tribesman in the middle of Africa somewhere, or an Aborigine somewhere in Australia, and you've never heard of Jesus Christ or God or anything, you're lost. Or if you've never heard of Allah, you're done. Or if you've never heard of any of the major
Or
religions,
worse yet, if you have heard of these things and
oh, that's
still make a
worse.
different choice.
Oh yeah, that's even worse.
The Christians will tell you that if you know about Christianity, but you still choose to be a Muslim, oh my, you are really in trouble. It's even worse if we know about these particular commandments that have been given to us and do not pay attention to them. And now we're really in trouble. If you're a Hindu,
Mm.
Christians will tell you that all Hindus, all Jews, all Muslims, all members of the Baha'i faith, all non-Christians of any sort are in fact not going to be saved. You haven't been saved. So I guess you're going to go to hell.
But isn't it funny though that Jesus was a Jew?
Before he converted.
Yes, he converted to what himself? He
He never
converted to
intended to,
Christianity.
yeah, I don't think that he ever intended to start a religion, but
No.
he did intend to leave an example, to set an example for
Yes.
humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. As I love to quote Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, Christ was crucified on one day, but his teachings have been crucified for 2,000 years. And I thought that's
Yeah.
such a great comment. Um, so when you've mentioned one thing that you've mentioned in another, I saw somewhere you spoke about mourning and not mourning the ones you love. When I saw that, I wanted to ask you about it. What did you mean by you shouldn't mourn loved ones? I saw that somewhere. Is that something you could talk about?
You mean loved ones who have passed on to another?
Correct. Yes, not mourning
Well,
loved ones who have passed on.
well, I was told in conversations with God that nobody dies.
Hmm.
In fact, nothing dies. All of life simply changes the form in which it is expressed. So what we call death in the human experience, I was told in CWG, is simply a change of address. You simply move from the realm of the physical to the realm of the spiritual.
Hmm.
And that is not something to be mourned. That's something to be celebrated. We can mourn our own loss if we choose, the loss of that physical connection, but we would not mourn their loss or feel bad for them. And we don't even have to experience that we've completely lost our connection with them because the souls of what we call the dearly departed fly to us at the speed of our thought.
Hmm.
The moment we
Uh,
even think about someone who has passed on, their soul instantaneously connects with us and comes to us and can interact with us, as Stephen Simon will tell you about his beloved wife, Linda,
mhm.
as Gary Zukav will tell you about his beloved wife as well, and many, many, many other people, not just two. We could name hundreds and thousands of people who have testified that they've had that exact experience. So, my mother gave me a wonderful lesson. Let me just complete my thought about this. The story I would share with you is when my mom passed on. She had, the doctors told us, she's not going to be here much longer. I mean, her death is imminent, but they allowed us in the family to go see her in the intensive care unit, the ICU. We each were given 5 minutes to spend with her. And the doctors told us candidly, this could be your last 5 minutes. So say what you really feel you need to say. So I went in, it was my turn. We have 4 children in our family and my dad. So, it was my turn to go in. And I thought, what do you say when you're seeing the person for the last time? And it's probably going to be the last time. And I wept. And my mom said to me, sweetheart, don't die. Don't cry. I'm sorry. She said, don't cry, sweetheart, don't cry. She said, I want you to make me a promise. Would you make me a promise on my deathbed? I said, anything, anything. She said, dance on my grave. I never forgot it. I never forgot those words. And of course, 2 months later, after I got over my initial grieving period, I flew to Wisconsin where she was buried with the rest of the family that grew up there. I got on a plane and literally flew to Wisconsin, halfway across the country, so that I could keep my promise. Got a motel room near the cemetery, went to the cemetery, found her grave, looked both ways to make sure no one would be watching me and thinking that I was being sacrilegious, stood on top of her grave and did a little soft shoe, a little celebration. Because when my mom said, dance on my grave, she said, sweetheart, I know where I'm going. I'm going back home with God. Celebrate with me. I've had a good life. And I'm going to have a good afterlife. Dance on my grave. One day I'm going to write a book honoring my mother. And the book is going to be titled Dance on My Grave.
That's beautiful.
But I told my wife what I want on my gravestone, because I suspect there may be, 1 or 2 people anyway who might visit my gravestone. My children might come by to pay their respects every so often. So on the gravestone, my wife understands that the following words are to be chiseled out. Now that was fun.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, let me ask you, if we're going back home, what is the purpose of this? Why go through all of this hardship and ups and downs and joys and sorrows and all of this insanity and love and beauty and horror and this whole gambit of emotions and experiences? Why go through it if heaven is, or the other side, or home with God is perfect? Why go through all of this?
Well, it's not perfect in the sense that we think of heaven. There are, my understanding, again, I'm not making this stuff up. This is what I was told in my conversations with God. But my understanding from my conversations with God is that what we call heaven really is only 1/3 of what heaven really is. Heaven, or the kingdom of God, if you please, is divided into 3 parts: the spiritual realm, the physical realm, and the realm of pure being. That's called, if you please, the Holy Triangle. So when we're in the physical realm, we're still in heaven. Physical realm is, and that's why that's why Jesus said to pray to God that things would be on earth as they are in heaven, because that's the whole point of being on earth. Now, why do we leave the spiritual realm and come into the physical realm? Because in the spiritual realm, we can experience bliss, joy, and happiness, but we can't demonstrate who we really are. And the highest bliss, the grandest joy, is in demonstrating and experiencing who we really are. But we can't experience that in heaven, in what we call heaven, in the realm of the spiritual, if you please. We can't experience that for a very interesting reason, because there's nothing else. You can't even experience how wonderful chocolate ice cream is if you've only been given chocolate ice cream all of your life and never tasted strawberry, and never tasted vanilla, and never tasted peach ice cream, or any other kind of ice cream. If you've only so in the absence of what is not, what is not. I don't know what it's like to be 6 feet tall. If everything
Mm-hmm.
in my life is 6 feet tall, if the trees are 6 feet tall, the grass is 6 feet tall, every plant is 6 feet tall, every person is exactly 6 feet tall. If everything in the world was precisely 6 feet tall, being 6 foot tall would not be experienceable by me. But I came to the realm of the physical because in the physical, there are things that are not 6 feet tall, which would allow me to experience myself as being 6 feet tall. There are also things that are not what we would call divine, which allows me to experience my own divinity. Therefore, male and female, he created he them. Or as the French would say in simple terms, vive la différence.
Yes. Neil, how do we rediscover who we really are? How do we discover, or again,
Life is not a
rediscover?
process. Life we don't discover. Sorry
Okay.
for the interruption, but life is not a process of discovery. I
Uh-huh.
was told in conversations with God, life is not a process of discovery. Life is a process of creation.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not a school. I didn't send you down there to learn anything. I
Mm-hmm.
sent you down there to remember what you already know, to choose and to create who you really are, to demonstrate and experience it so that you may know yourself not just conceptually, but experientially. And I said, okay, God, this sounds very, very highfalutin. Can you just give me a simple example? And she said, sure, I'll give you a very, really easy example. Do you think you're generous? I said, yeah, I think I'm a generous person. She said, well, are you generous with your time? I said, yeah, I give my time to people who really need it. Are you generous with the gifts that I've given you? I said, yeah, I'm generous with my talents. She said, are you generous with your money? I said, yeah, I think I'm generous with my money. I offer people money if they really need it. And if I walk down the street and find a homeless person, I might pull a 5 or a 10 or a 20 out of my pocket and put it in his little basket there. She said, but if you couldn't experience yourself being generous, you would only have a concept about yourself. You would know yourself conceptually as generous, but you would yearn for a way to express it, to experience it. And you know when I learned that? I learned that from a lady who stood outside the hotel that I visited a lot because we had meetings there in their meeting room. And she'd be outside in front of the hotel every day with a basket. And one day I walked by her for the 14th time and I said, why don't you just get a job? Why are you out here every single day holding your basket so people can put money in your basket? And she said, if I wasn't here holding my basket out, how could you experience who you really are? She actually said that to me.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I said, brother, have you hit the nail on the head? And I pulled out, not bragging, just saying, $100 bill. It says, "Yeah, sweetheart, it was a piece of impeccable wisdom. Please accept this as my thanks." So when we encounter the opposite, this is all described in Conversations with God as the law of opposites. When we discover the opposite of who we really are, we discover who we really are. And we are thankful. We don't condemn that which we are not. Or as one person said a few thousand years ago,
Mm-hmm.
judge not and neither condemn, but be a light unto the world, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. And when a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn it off for your left.
Mm-hmm.
And when a man steals your coat, give him your shirt as well. And when a man demands that you walk 1 mile with him, go with him twain. I could, of course, be wrong about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
Now, Neil, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Experiencing yourself as pure love, treating every other being as if they were a demonstration of pure love, even when they don't seem to be reflecting it, and knowing that God is pure love and lives in and through you. If you doubt that there is a God, it's because you've doubted that you are an individuation of divinity. But no one who seeks to demonstrate aspects of divinity ever doubts the existence of God. So my definition of a life that's fulfilled is a life that demonstrates and experiencing and experiences pure love.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Neil, what advice would you give him?
Don't do anything you did from the time you were born until the time you were 49.
Fair enough.
But from the time you were 53 onward, good going.
This is a question I ask all my guests, but I really want to hear your answer. How do you define God?
There is nothing that God is not. God is everything that ever was, is now, and ever will be. I define God as the all in all. But in a book called The God Solution, I have given more of a human definition of God, two-word definition: pure love. I believe that God is pure love. And by the way, anyone who wants to read that book, The God Solution, which is a solution to all the world's problems, as I understood it from the divine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who chooses to read that book, just send me an email at neale@nealdonaldwalsh.com, and I'll send you back a copy of the digital file of the God Solution at no cost. Just read it for free. I think you'll find a good reading there. The book is called The God Solution. It's yours by asking for it.
Thank you so much for that. My next question is, what is love?
Love is that which God is, that which we are. Love is the giving of everything that's good and joyful and free and open and wise and caring and compassionate and forgiving without needing anything in return. And I mean zero, needing nothing in return. We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us in that way, unless we can. And I've spent 17 years saying to my current wife, I've had a number of wives, but I've finally figured out what's going on in a relationship. And I spent the past 17 years with my current wife, which is the longest marriage I've ever had. And I say to her every day of my life, I require nothing of you. Not loyalty, certainly not obedience, not agreement, not pleasantness. I require nothing of you because I don't love you because of what I can get from you. I love you because of who you are. If you gave me nothing, I would still not stop loving you. Because love is not a quid pro quo. Love is not tit for tat. Love is not a bargain. It's not a trade deal. It's an expression of your true identity.
And finally, what is the ultimate purpose of life?
To demonstrate, to announce, declare, and to fully experience your true identity as an individuation of divinity.
And where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world, Neale?
CWG, which stands, of course, for Conversations with God, cwgconnect.com, where there's a platform labeled Ask Neale. I visit it 3 times a day. People routinely ask me these kinds of questions, and I answer them 3 times a day.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Your life is not about you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that your life is not about you, then you experience that your life is truly about you in the universal sense for an elegant reason. There's nobody else in the room. There's nobody else in the room. We are all one.
Neale, it is such a pleasure and honor speaking to you again, my friend. Thank you so much for not only being on the show, but for all the work you're doing to help awaken this planet. Thank you again, my friend.
What a kind thing to say. Thank you for those kind words. And if you wait another year and a half to have me on the program again, I'll never speak to you.
Fair enough, Neale. A pleasure as always, my friend. Thank you again. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.